Paul, let me, after having said that, thank you for a couple of things. First, I do really appreciate the introduction because it wasn't read. I get very upset when people read my bio and it sounds like an obituary. And at my age, obituaries are nearby, and I sort of don't like them so much. But I really appreciate that. Now, you know, we all know, and we've been talking together about the organizations like this rise and fall on the quality of their paid leadership and their volunteer leadership. And, you know, when I met Paul, you know, they introduced me to Paul, and I said, well, Paul's an interesting fellow. What's this Wegmans stuff? And I looked into Wegmans, and I went to visit some Wegmans, and I can't wait till he puts one near me in Maryland, in which case I will immediately gain about 15 pounds. And by the way, Heather, let me say a word. I've been around, I go to a lot of these meetings, you get a sense, you get a feel, you're doing very well. What you've done here to grow this place, to expand the interest, to bring people on is only the beginning of what you're going to do. And by the way, we expect to see you in California later in the week. Actually, I have this ear is a little bent because I sat next to her. How do you do this? What do you do this? Because she has a great sense of wanting to learn, and I think you've got a great future here. She knows policy, she knows process, she knows the right people, she's a smart lawyer, and I think you're very well served, and Paul, congratulations to you for putting this together. Now, our organizations have... Let me start by trying to take stock of where we are right now. Our economy is stuck in first gear. We've had 43 months of unemployment above 8%. 20 million Americans are either unemployed, underemployed, or given up looking for work. The recovery from the financial crisis is proving to be almost as bad as the crisis itself. In fact, the median family income has declined during the recovery. Today, our government borrows 40 cents of every dollar we spend. We've added $5 trillion to the debt in the last 4 years. Our Federal Reserve is gobbling up U.S. debt, mortgages, and other assets at a dazzling pace. Thank you for some of the things they've done. Its balance sheet has ballooned by trillions of dollars. A lot of that money is being held in reserve by banks. But what happens when it's unleashed? Our economy is overregulated. Our workforce is undereducated. Our opportunities to sell American goods and services is truncated as the world economy slows. You know what that means? It means that Europe is the largest export market for the United States and for China, and everybody's slowing down. And on top of all of that, we're teetering on the precipice of a fiscal cliff. If Congress and the President don't act immediately after the election, before the end of the year, we face the largest tax hike in American history, which will be $4.5 trillion over 10 years, and more than $1 trillion in indiscriminate cost cuts, which, by the way, the reason I say they're indiscriminate, they hit the military larger than they should, and they don't even touch Medicare and Medicaid. Can anyone say the word double-dip recession? Every organization, Democrat and Republican, tells you if we don't change that issue, we will face that double dip. Too many regulations, too few jobs, higher taxes, and low growth. That should sound a familiar tale to people in New York, because it also describes some of your economy. But let me say that I offer my congratulations to the administration and to others in the private sector here, because New York, with all of their problems, is moving up the ladder and doing better. And I think for me to offer that to New York, as Liz and I are New Yorkers, is something that's happy, but it's also, there are a lot of things that still need to be done here. So what are the opportunities? We have some serious challenges, even some daunting ones. But I didn't run through this litany of statistics because I think it's time for us to collect our marbles and go home and cry in the soup. No, now is the time to buck up. Now is the time to stop kicking the can down the road because we're almost out of road. Now is the time for leadership in government and in the private sector. So how do we get back on track? How do we rev up our economic engine, and how do we get people working again? I hate to say it, but it ain't rocket science. Let's get back to basics. Let's get back to common sense. Getting our fiscal house in order is our first challenge. Common sense tells us that when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. For America, that hole is a massive debt, out-of-control spending, a broken tax system, and unsustainable entitlement programs. You don't know what entitlements are. There's Social Security, there's Medicare, there's Medicaid. We need all those programs. But we have 10,000 people a day retiring. Oh, by the way, 5,000 people a day dying. And we need to deal with this issue. Put simply, we need to get our fiscal house in order. We need to stop digging ourselves a deeper hole through reckless and unsustainable spending that involves both short and long-term challenges. Our immediate crisis is the fiscal cliff. You all have heard about the fiscal cliff? When you hit Election Day, the next morning, it's the November the 7th, we've got to the end of the year to deal with our fiscal cliff. That involves the expiration of the Bush tax cuts and a number of other business tax cuts. Add them all up and you get the largest tax increase in the history of this country on the last day of the year at 12 in midnight. Now, let me say a word about regulations. You have them in New York, and we have them on the national scene. And we've always had regulation. Now, we all went to school. Remember the civics? There are three parts of the government. It's the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Anybody remember the regulatory branch? It's 3 times bigger than the other ones put together. And we have got to deal with this because, don't choke the goose that lays the golden eggs. And the goose in America is private sector, and the golden eggs is economic growth and jobs. And if you look at everything we're doing on the regulatory side, it's scary. I mean, I've got 400 people trying to follow all that stuff. It's good for the paper business. It's good, it hires a lot of people, but it sure as hell is showing down the economy. Now look, if you look at American companies, including a lot of New York companies, they're sitting on $2 to $2.5 trillion worth of cold cash. Wegman's got a lot of it. Now, hey, listen, don't you all clap. I know a lot of companies in this room, and you're sitting on a lot of cash. But I don't blame you. You don't know what's going to happen to the economy. You don't know what's going to happen to the global economy. And you're sure as hell not going to go out and hire a lot of people until you figure out what's going to happen on health care, what's going to happen on Dodd-Frank, what's going to happen on the environmental side, what's going to happen on labor and employment law. And you know what they don't know? They don't know where they're going to put these jobs because they got a lot of options. So, and on that note, I want to thank you for a great dinner and a fun time and a great time to come. We've been here before, but to come back to New York. And I want you to promise me that you're going to do everything you can to support Heather, that you're going to grow this place, that the local chambers are going to play in the game, and you are going to be a part of the process. If you're not, somebody else is. So have a great night. Thank you very much. Thanks for a great dinner. And Paul, see you in Washington. Thanks.